ICQ Podcast, episode 443, Multimeters Revisited. Hello and welcome, fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, to this, our 443rd episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported in this episode by Steve Annis, Kilo Juliet 5 Tango, Brad Councilman, Whiskey 1 Bravo Charlie Charlie, and our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin, M1MRB, Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Leslie, Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is Multimeters Revisited. Well, as mentioned there at the very start of the show, we are very happy to have two very kind listeners support us with a one-off donation. And Steve Annis, KJ5T, says, keep up the great podcast. It was great meeting some of the crew at Hambench. And Steve, was a pleasure, I say, to meet you too. And say we really hope you continue to enjoy our show as I say we motor on through the 400s of the episodes. And Brad Councilman, Whiskey 1 Bravo Charlie Charlie, also sent us a one-off donation. Thanks, Brad, for that very kind donation. We really do appreciate it. Now, those guys visited our very popular webpage. It's icqpodcast.com/donate, where they, along with our monthly and subscription donors, show the value they get from their show by turning that into a monetary figure, selecting one of the options on the page that best suits that for them, and so sending it our way. So we really would appreciate you thinking of us, as I say, and supporting your show by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. Right, now we're going to join Martin, Chris, Martin and Leslie to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including opportunity to chase a rare Californian island and turning your Android phone into a ham radio. As always, hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to the ICQ Podcast, episode 443, and tonight's news roundtable for this episode. With me tonight, I have Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Martin. How you doing?
I'm ducking and diving a bit better than I have been for the last couple of weeks, but I'll explain that later. Also, my side of the pond, or just up the road from me, is Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL. Hi, Martin.
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, not as bad as I have been, put it that way.
On the mend.
On the mend. And also, our side of the pond tonight, we have Mr. Leslie Butteresfields, G0CIB. Hi, Leslie.
Oh, that's me, yes. Good evening, Martin. I'm back. I've been repaired. They've sorted me out. And, well, the parts were difficult to find on eBay, but as you gather, I'm here and raring to go.
Well, it's good to have you back, mate. Now, as it turns out, we have no representation from the States tonight. Unfortunately, Frank's not very well, but it's nothing serious, but he's not feeling great tonight, so we've let him off. And Bill has been called away to work, so unfortunately, you've got just a UK perspective on some news stories, quite a few of them from the States, but hopefully we won't upset anybody. So there you go.
Right, get well soon, Frank.
Yeah, get well soon, Frank. And hope all goes well, Bill. Right. Rare Californian island to be activated by Armed Forces Day. It's the first time they've done it in 53 years. That's a long time. I'm going to say, Leslie, and I know I'm throwing it at you and you don't live in the States, but you were in the armed forces. What do you think?
I think it's absolutely great, Martin. It was, as you say, activated 53 years ago by two radio amateurs previously. And now, weather permitting, it will be done by Will Costello, WC6DX. So he's been authorised to activate from St. Nicholas Island from the November the 8th to the 12th, 2024. And they've listed the equipment he's going to be using, including a 100-watt HF rig, I take it. First of all, there's a link to the Armed Forces Day, which is always great. I do like things like that. And the other thing is actually the IOTA work in these far, far off islands as IOTA, and I do like chasing them. And I think this is really something to look forward to, and I hope it gets worked.
Yeah, so do I, mate. And mine, at least they are operating this island, giving lots of people a chance to have contacts with them, because we're right at the peak of this here sunspot cycle, and certainly 10 metres has been heaving over the last month, so maybe a lot of people will do it, mine.
Yeah, well, they seem to have picked the right time for it. I did see on social media recently that people putting comments up saying, "Oh my God, 10 metres is absolutely buzzing." I think, as Chris mentioned, this is, as this podcast goes out, this actually happened in the past because it was between the 8th and the 12th of November. But it looked like he was operating on, it's 6 to 20 metres, and also took another antenna for 40 to 30 metres for daytime use to give people that within the skip zone or within the bit you miss the opportunity to work them as well. So yeah, well done to them. It's a rare island. It's another one for the QSL chasers and the island loggers. I don't know, the people that chase rare islands and things like that. I believe the land is owned by the US Navy, so I presume it's still classed as part of America. So I guess the normal radio rules must apply, although I know military stations often, or military bases often, think they can make up their own rules. But yeah, it's hopefully people have had a chance to work it and have a bit of fun. More new stations in the log.
Yeah, sounds fun. And the only time I've come across driving through a military base where I wasn't allowed to operate was on Cyprus. You put 5B in front of your call sign in Cyprus if you're a full licensee. But when you drive through Akatiri base, that has a different designation, and you're not allowed to transmit in there because that's not classed as part of Cyprus as such. And if some people from Cyprus are upset, but I know you can't operate there. So you're right. Some military bases are different. You have to understand the rules.
Martin, on that subject, the similar rules apply in Gibraltar. Can't use your CEPT license. You can apply for a VHF license, but I think there's only one licensed station on Gibraltar, and that's the radio club. You can't get a HF license as an individual there either because of the military connections. Right.
So, yeah, when we go to these places, you need to do your homework as well. Basically, that's what we're saying. But great news story about an island being activated for the right reasons. So, Chris, what do you think about this island being activated?
Yeah, not much more to add. I think Leslie and Martin have covered it. But yeah, good that the guys got permission to get back on the island, put it on the air. I'm sure a lot of folks will want to get it in their logbook, given it's not going to be activated very often.
Yeah, lovely story, in all honesty, and for the right reasons. Right, move to our next news story. And I like this one. The ARRL members have raised $47,000, that's what I said, $47,000 for STEM education in their online auction. Now, I'm sure the amateurs got some really interesting stuff in the auction, but it's a nice way of helping education, and I think it was a good one. Now, I'm going to go to you first, Chris. What do you think?
I think it's a great one. Yeah, it looks like they've had lots of items that have been up for auction. I think it says there were 206 items altogether, and there were, there's a huge amount of money, and it's going to go to a good cause. So I think it's fantastic. They've had some good sponsorship from RT Systems, and I think this has been a very innovative thing to do. They've created things like mystery jump boxes from the ARRL lab, that sort of thing. So they've been able to try to inject a bit of excitement, I suppose, in it. And they also had some prizes for people like Mastrant, Rope, etc. as well. So it sounds like they've had some good support from a few companies, and various bits of things themselves they've also put in the auction, and frankly raised an awful lot of money. So that's going to go to some good use.
Yeah, and STEM seems to be bigger in the States than over here in the UK, but it's still a good thing to talk about. Now, Martin, what's your thoughts on this one?
I'm just reading this. $47,000 for amateur radio STEM education. I'm curious to see what the syllabus is. Is this specifically related to amateur radio? But I don't know. Either way, it's all, selling mystery junk boxes, and it reminds me of our junk sales that we had at the club where you could bid on a SCART lead and things like that. So hopefully they had better things than that in the boxes, that's for sure, with $47,000. Looks like there's a lot of stuff going out there. I am also curious to know, because there was an ARRL Field Day Cooler Bag surprise, and I read it, and I read this thing, and with 24 bids was one of the mystery junk boxes. I read that as 24 buds and was hoping that was going to be in the Field Day Cooler Bag. So I'd like to know what was in there, please. But otherwise, $47,000, that's no mean feat, and all going to good causes. So fantastic.
Yeah, well, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and maths, Martin. It's what they try and teach in schools now. There's quite a big thing about it over here. In our area, it's called STEAM because they've added A for art, but it's a good one there.
I think, Martin, on this occasion, it's going to the ARRL Teachers Institute, which we talked about back before on the podcast. These are where they provide training to teachers to then go out back to their schools, etc., and then use that to teach wireless technology. So it's relating to that. So
that's pushing amateur radio further, I guess.
Absolutely. So I guess it's quite an efficient way of doing it. Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
ARRL stepping up and putting amateur radio first. Well done to them.
Yeah. Well, it's a good one. I like this idea. Leslie, what's your thoughts on this one?
I think this is a great story, Martin. $47,000 is a very significant sum indeed. And I know our American friends are very big on philanthropy and charitable donations and this type of thing. What I think it's doing, and this is only my feeling, is that it's using that money, like you said, for teachers and to show them what amateur radio is about, but it's sowing the seeds for the future. That's what this is all about. Yes, people have the mystery boxes and all some of the stuff. I know we used to have our junk sales and we were lucky if we raised 50 quid. I've got to say, well done. That's a really significant amount of money you raised, and well done, everyone.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right, guys. I remember club junk sales and even trying to sell things at rallies. Nobody wants to spend any money. But if you were doing a silent key sale, then often people, grow up a bit and decide that they ought to be a bit more honest and give a sensible amount. And things like this, I'm sure a number of the amateurs gave a sensible amount for stuff and didn't think they should get it for the square root of nothing. Because,
Can I add one point on that, Martin?
Go on.
We recently had one of our members very sadly pass away. And what happened was his equipment was donated to my own club, Silverthorne Radio Club. And the instructions I got was make sure it goes to a good home. And I can assure the gentleman's son that it did go to a very good home. Yes, it raised a little bit of money for the club, but the radio amateurs concerned were absolutely delighted. And it's should we say push their means to get on HF. And I know the radio amateur concerned. He was beaming. He said, "You're wonderful," and I said, "Yep, that's what it's there for. Go and play." So, yeah.
So I'm sure people donate, bid sensible prices because it was for a good cause. That's what
absolutely.
I was going. Now, next news story may not be sort of the most up to date bite yourself story, but this is a gentleman who has managed to add a PCB or a connection block to his mobile phone, an Android mobile phone, to turn the Android mobile phone into a ham radio. And this is an open source project. Now this is not just bolting a board on the back, a pre-made one. You've got to do some work. And secondly, it's not just a VoIP app that you run on your phone that somehow connects to amateur radio. This is actually adding a transceiver board to the back of your radio, your mobile phone. Leslie, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, Martin. I'm looking at this. I was totally engrossed there because he's got a video. I just sort of name the chap. His call sign is KV4 Papa, and he's got a YouTube video out showing the step-by-step instructions on what to do. It sort of looks like an SMD board which bolts to the back of your mobile phone. I'm not sure if it goes via the USB port, and it's essentially a 2-meter transceiver. I think it's FM only, but I stand to be corrected on that. It looks a really interesting project. Yes, you can probably buy things cheaper off the shelf, off eBay or wherever, but that's not the point. This is about experimentation and just playing about with radio. So I like this project, and I recommend to have a look at it. Need some soldering iron skills and a bit of, some wire cutters and that sort of thing. But it seems a really nice little project. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all. We'll just say you're right. It's a nice little transceiver board. It does connect to the USB-C socket on the bottom of an Android phone. If you've got an Apple phone, I don't think there's any software for it yet, but the guys released this as open source. I'm sure if people want to help to develop for Apple, then they probably will. Martin, what's your thoughts?
Do you know what? It's a nice idea because why would you do it? Because you're an amateur, you're a ham radio person, you want to do it, and because you can do it. And it's a nice, fun-looking project. You can add a VHF radio effectively to your phone. And I read the title, and I saw this in the news a week or so ago. And it's the title is "Turn Your Android Phone into a Ham Radio with this open source project." And there's part of me thinking, how are they doing that? And it is kind of, you've got to build some circuitry because you are effectively bolting something on the back. You are effectively bolting a radio onto the back and controlling it with your phone. Why would you want to do that? I don't know.
Because it's fun.
Exactly. Because you can. Now, if you want a phone that has a radio in it, Hytera make them, Motorola make them, R-Finder is an app, but they look it up. You can find phones that have radios in. But why not? You can do it. They do say about traditional home radio setups are bulky, sitting on a desk with antennas, a microphone, and the radio itself. Well, that's the base station. Obviously there are handhelds. Handhelds exist already, but it could be a fun little project. You do need it. I don't think it's a start project. It's not something if you're setting out for the first time trying to build something. I don't think it's one that you would necessarily want to do, especially as the software can be, you've got to program, a little bit about coding and stuff to make it work. But hey, why not have a play? It might be the start of something bigger. Maybe you can get a little module sits in a case. You know how you get the battery cases that have the extra battery. Maybe you could put your radio in there, and in the future, maybe it'll be a plug-in module that you can sell, and you could sell it to people to use when they're out in those places that have no phone coverage. We take walkie-talkies with us.
This is how these things start, Martin.
Exactly. The likes of Motorola, Hytera, someone had the idea at some point, didn't they? Well, I bet the employees that come up with the designs, I bet they're all licensed.
It's a great little device, and I'm going to correct a pair of you just on one minor thing, because I know you meant what you meant. It doesn't physically bolt to the back of your mobile phone. It actually sticks with a piece of
yeah, that would be yeah.
That's right. Nicely. So for anybody who's got a very expensive Android phone, you don't have to drill holes in the back of it.
Alternatively, Martin has got a SDS drill, and he'd be happy to help you drill a hole in it.
Yeah, oh dear.
So beware.
Don't use a masonry one.
Martin's seen my big drill. So, an interesting little thing. Chris, you and I have bought far too many handy talkies in the past, but what do you think? I mean, even the case is available if you go a 3D printer. to print the case for this little board. What do you think?
So you are right. I do own far too many handheld radios. But I really like this. I like it because it's something you're building yourself. And I always like to use something that, something that's a bit homebrew. Obviously, if I did it, I'm not designing it myself, but certainly I'm constructing it myself. It doesn't actually look that difficult. It talks about only having to solder three components. I think that's what it says, or I could be wrong. But what I like is it looks to have some good support. Often it's the case, you buy a kit or something, and sometimes there are some really good kit builders, by the way, or kit manufacturers, by the way, but sometimes you don't get a lot of support. You just get a kit of bits, and it's very scant instructions. Like I said, not always the case, but sometimes that's the case. This has got, I'm just looking there, there's a really nice video on YouTube where this chap, K4VP, talks all about it, shows the various steps. It looks like it's got some really good support. So yeah, it looks to have some good support from the producer. The chap's name is Vance, I think it's Vagel or Vagel, I'm not sure you know his name. He actually works for Google, so he's obviously quite a technical person. He's been there for a long time doing user experience design, so someone that obviously understands the technology behind some of this stuff. And I just like the idea of having a software-defined handheld, really. I'm not sure if it's exactly how it works, whether you're controlling it from your phone, or whether you actually it's actually using the phone to modulate and demodulate, etc. Not sure, but it does look like a nice bit of kit. Also, the fact it's software controlled makes me think, this is version 1. What's version 2 and version 3 going to have? This is just an FM analog single band radio today, but in software, could that do other stuff? Could we make it? Could someone else, with it given its open source, make it work with DMR or other digital modes? Could it do other stuff? Because it could be quite an interesting platform to. This might be just version 1. So that the future versions or future people get hold of this, they might decide to adopt it and use it for other things that could be quite interesting. So I quite like this, and I wish them all the best.
Yes, I think I agree with you, all three of you. It's what amateur radio is all about. It's about us learning and education and doing something a bit different. And yeah, I think it's only, from memory, I think the RF module's about 1 watt. So it's not the most powerful in the world. But that's not what it's about. It's about having something that you made on your back of your mobile phone that is using your mobile phone effectively as to display the buttons and the audio amplifier, and then connecting to a software-defined radio on the back end of via the USB port. Brilliant idea. So I'm pleased with that one. I wish him every success going forward. Now, next news story. The ISS are at it again, sending SSTV to celebrate human space flight. So over the next few days, we'll be seeing a number of slow scan images, I would suggest. Leslie, do you want to go first on this one?
I certainly will, Martin. The SSTV images will be transmitted from the International Space Station between November the 11th and the 18th. The images will feature activities from the 40th anniversary celebrating amateur radio in human spaceflight, an event hosted by ARRL earlier this year at the Space Kennedy Center in Florida. So that's the gist of what's going on. I can assure people that picking up the ISS is very, very easy indeed. And when they had a link to Gilware Park, which is just down the road from here, I actually picked it up with a handheld with a dipole out the window. And I'm absolutely certain that the software is easily available for SSTV. I'm sure there's some Android software out there. So good luck on this one, and it's another good thing.
Yeah, it certainly is, Leslie. And you're dead right, because if you know when the ISS is going over, it can be done with a handy talkie. And just putting your mobile phone with an SSTV app next to it, and the sound coming out of your speaker can then be picked up by the microphone on your mobile phone, and the app decodes the picture. I've done it that way. not the best, and I'm sure I know that if you've got a better antenna and all those sort of things, and
It will work, Martin.
It'll work,
What you described is absolutely fine.
yeah, it'll work. So that's a good one. So, mine, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I like SSTV because it's just one of those things. It's a nice old-fashioned analog thing. It reminds me of fax machines and dial-up modems and things like that. I'm going to try this. You can definitely listen on a handheld. You don't even need special antenna because I have done it with the rubber duck handheld. The rubber duck antenna that comes with the handheld. Although if you have a larger antenna, it will make your life a little bit easier. Just turn your handheld to the sideways so the antenna is facing the sky and give it a go. Am I going to try it? If there's a pass that coincides with me being able to get up on the roof at work, absolutely. Unfortunately, I work in central London. There is a lot of noise in central London, in particular on VHF and UHF. So whether I'll be able to pick anything up, I don't know. But I'm going to have a look for the passes and see what's going on. I do wonder if they're transmitting this and they're transmitting this. I'm presuming it must be continuous and it's not like we're just doing it at random. What the hell is the duty cycle on that radio? That's kudos to, I think it's Kenwood who provide the radio up there. But yeah, it's pretty good. But 145.8 and the mode is expected to be PD120, although you can just leave your thing in auto and it will pick that up, I would guess.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's, in fairness, it doesn't have to be mega high power because it's out in the open pointing down. So
it's the highest antenna you're ever going to get, isn't it?
yeah. Oh, yeah. And the other thing is,
Yes.
the other thing is that it doesn't have to be a lot of power. Although duty cycle, I'm guessing they'll transmit fairly regularly, but it won't be at 100%. I wouldn't have thought at the time, but it'll be fairly often as it goes over. So there you go. Chris, you've done some of this in the past, haven't you?
I have. In fact, I put a video on years ago on YouTube of me decoding the ISS's SSTV transmissions, and it's great fun. You've just got to figure out when it's coming over. I used it with my collinear on the roof of the house, and works pretty well. Except, and you can see it on the picture when you download it. It is the you can tell when that's the way the ISS is going directly overhead because the picket, the radiation pattern or the receive pattern on the collinear is very much towards the horizon. So as the ISS is going directly above, you pretty much lose the signal. So it gets very very distorted just on the light because those folks that done it before, SSTV builds up. It's a bit like the old dial-up, as Martin was saying, the old dial-up modem days when you used to go to the internet and watch the pictures gradually build up across the screen because the connection was so slow. Similar to that, you kind of watching this kind of picture gradually going down the screen as it's building up, as it's downloading it and decoding it, and as it the bit where the ISS is going directly above is a bit where your aerial is not very good at receiving it, and that's where it gets a bit distorted, and then it goes back and a bit pixelated, and then it goes back as it's passing over and goes the other way. Then the signal tends to improve and you tend to get a better picture. So I tend to get the pictures I have all got some lines in the middle where it's not very good, where my aerial's not very good at picking it up. If you had a Yagi or something pointing at the ISS, you'd get a much better picture. But I haven't got that.
No, I think in some ways you're better off not having a pass that goes overhead, a satellite pass out at 60 degrees or something to the horizon. You'll get probably a much better picture because on a collinear because you won't be losing the bit where it goes over the top of you. But all in all, it's great fun. Costs you nothing. A few interesting pictures from space to show friends, family as well. And everybody likes space, so you can't go that far wrong with it. Move to our last news story, and we are moving through these pretty quick. But it is an interesting one as far as I'm concerned. HAMSCI, who are a group that we talk to quite regularly that do ham radio and scientific experiments, have just had a program boost by getting a grant for $1.8 million. Now, that to me is probably well worth it, in that the work these guys are doing is really, really good. And I must admit, I was surprised when I was at the National Ham Fest to find that even they're working with the RSGB. Now, being an American operation initially, I was surprised that they're working with that in other countries, but this just proves how important their work is. So, Chris, what's your thoughts on this one?
Again, money that's been donated to a good cause, a similar one, I suppose, into this HAMSCI activity. So this money has been donated, so it's a lot of money, $1.8 million, by the NSF. So I have looked up the NSF, and that is the National Science Foundation, which is part of the US federal government. So, yeah, I mean, this is great. And, we know HAMSCI does some good work, and I'm sure they'll use that money wisely. And it talks about measuring the weather effects among the ionosphere. So it sounds like they've got a specific project in mind, and I'm sure this will come out with some useful data that's going to be helpful to us going forward.
Yeah, I think so, Chris. I think so. And you and I met the guys down in Dayton. I've interviewed them for the podcast, and they're really interesting guys, the HAMSCI guys. So, good one. Martin, what's your thoughts?
I am interested in this. They say they're going to be using things like HF Doppler shifts, HF amateur radio, whisper transmissions, VLF transmissions, and natural radio emissions and the geomagnetic field to measure stuff. It's interesting stuff. I'm not going to pretend I understand it all, but I'd be very interested to see what comes out of it. I am curious though, because I'm sort of read this. Maybe I've read this wrong. This is to help a network of ham radios, ham radio operators, helping to measure the weather effects in the Earth's ionosphere. What do they do with the data they collect? And also, if they're collecting data from amateurs and are essentially paying for it, has that not just made amateur radio commercial and therefore technically breaching conditions of licensing? I mean, I'm not saying they shouldn't do it, but isn't that something we're not supposed to do?
No, I don't believe they do pay amateurs. The data, there is a cost of doing a lot of this work. We collect the data, they process it, and in fairness, the data processing has come up with some really interesting things. I mean, earlier in the year, there were total eclipses, and they were collecting data from amateurs, because the thing is, if you set up a science station, how many science monitoring stations can you set up? Half a dozen? Maybe a dozen?
Oh, I completely agree. You can do that, and equally, you've got amateurs essentially worldwide that are using all these different apps. It's a no-brainer to take the data. I was just curious as I read the news story like that.
Yeah. So I think would be my interpretation of this is, once you've got that data, you've got to do things with it, and there is a cost, obviously, computing power and big databases and all those sort of things to get the information out that we've all collected for them. But they do share it back with us, and they have published their findings on their website, which will, it's not a one-way street, Martin. That's all I'm saying. They are very
I'm not trying to pick a fight with that. I'm just curious how it went, but I'll be interested to see more. I will be Googling that a bit later.
Yeah. So, Leslie, last thoughts on this one?
Let me just have a look, Martin. I'm going to... Right, that's it. I've clicked it. Right. Well, the setup, I'll just sort of talk about the setup. They talk about a network of 30 standardized receive stations capable of observing HF Doppler shifts. They talk about Whisper, and I'm just seeing the grant will fund 10 Whisper SON transmitters to serve as a source for GPS stabilized HF beacons, which will tie up into the existing Whisper network. I have played with Whisper before. and I found the results absolutely amazing. I bought one of these little off-the-shelf boxes with a whip out the window, and I was absolutely staggered with the results. The thing is that we like to think we understand a lot about the ionosphere, and we don't. There's still a lot of gaps in our knowledge, and so first of all, you've got the money to buy the equipment, but then you've got the data, the sorting of the data, like Martin says, and computing on that, and eventually the results will be published, and this does filter down into the amateur radio community. I'm absolutely certain of that. We've seen it before, and like I said, it's about filling in our gaps in knowledge, and I am glad that actually putting money into looking at things like this. It is a good thing. If we want HF and other communications to carry on, we've got to be doing the research. And unfortunately, it does cost money. No, I don't think this is commercialising amateur radio as such. It's just something you need to get that sort of set up. That's my thoughts, Martin.
Yeah. But interestingly, we are interested in the ionosphere and what's going on.
Yeah, that's what we're about.
Yeah. So we are the right people that if you came along and said, hey, guys, would you help us? There'd be very few saying
yes, please.
Yeah. And this has been a great marriage between the science community and the ham radio community, and long may it remain so. And as they do more and more experiments, more and more data comes back, which is great.
And our picture will be more and more complete. It will never be fully understood.
No.
Because that's what makes it so interesting. We don't know certain things.
Yeah.
But that's fine. That's fine.
I mean, interestingly enough, and I'll throw this hand grenade in the room, which is before I go, if we lived on a different planet, let's supposing it was feasible to migrate to Mars, HF would be no different to operating VHF or UHF on Mars because there's no ionosphere. So why, would we have ever got VHF and UHF? We'd have done it all with HF, and it would have been line of sight, and we wouldn't have had worldwide communications until we'd either run wires between all the countries or put satellites up there and bounced off the satellites. So we do live in a rather unique environment, the Earth and its ionosphere, and it's so unique that nobody else from anywhere else even in the universe, and I don't believe in little green men, but if there were such things, I doubt if they'd understand it either. So anyway,
Martin, everyone knows they're not little green men; they're little blue men.
All right. Okay, I'll leave you on that one.
Just been very briefly there, Martin. That's one of the things that blows my mind. We talk about technology. Yeah. We talk about it wasn't for worldwide communications and us running cables between the countries. That's the thing that blows my mind. We have run cables between countries and around the world. To this day, and I know there are hundreds of thousands of cables under the sea. That blows my mind. The fact that we've even done that.
Yeah, it's happened. It's not very efficient these days, but it's happened. So there you go. Right, well, that concludes our news stories. A quick one tonight because there's only 4 of us. But let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time I spoke to them on the podcast, and hopefully a bit more than me. So let's start off. Leslie, what have you been up to?
Yes. Well, there was a guy on Facebook on the Ham Radio Ireland site. He came up with a Tono 7000E, believe it or not, and he's posting up various bits and pieces. And I came up, and his name was Pete Lee, and I went, I've got one of those. And he started talking about the bits and pieces and the battery connections, the battery box and the bits and pieces that go with it. And I thought, I've got to get that out of the cupboard. And I started looking at it. So I'm blaming Pete for that. Thank you very much for giving me a prod on that, Pete. So I've now got a teleprinter on my bed in bits. It's in the process of being there, and hope to get back on Ritzy soon. So that is what I've been playing with, Martin.
Right. Well, I've never done RTTY.
Ham Radio Island, that was it. Ham
Yeah.
Radio Island.
Yeah, I've never done RTTY. I used to fix teletypes back in the very, very early 80s, and they were the more modern ones. They weren't the big old mechanical things. They were the more modern ones. But we used them back then on one of the systems I worked on. But that's very interesting, Leslie. Right, Martin, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Could I just ask a question? Leslie has a teletype machine on his bed. I mean, some people take it to bed, or if it's a device, it's a TV remote or something like. Leslie's taking a teletype machine to. I'm not saying anything. Leslie, we love you, but
it's all in bits.
It's even worse. We probably need to have a little chat off the air.
Don't blame me. Blame Pete.
Let's move on from that. What have I been doing? My main station is still not properly connected up. That's a whole other story. Today, in fact, I've been playing quite a lot with radio today. Some people will know I work in radio and I work in events. So I use a lot of microphones. And today we had something in the region of 15 wireless microphones all going in the same space at the same time. We do have fully licensed channels, so we can separate them and they all work quite happily in harmony together. But as we were doing a show today, we were getting some RF hits, effectively something else happening in the background that was causing some interference and some dropouts on our channels today. So I go to my toolbox, I have a nice big toolbox at work, my big Pally case, and I pull out my little SDR, which is just an RTL SDR dongle. Opened it up, opened up the SDR software on my Mac, and literally got the waterfall, the plots, the spectrograph of what was going on the air, and we could instantly see what was going on, and we were able to find it. It was just a radio mic someone had switched on in another room that they hadn't tuned properly, and they're like, "Oi, you need to go and turn that off straight away," because we sort of knew where it was coming from. But one of my colleagues there, he sort of looked at the chart because he's an audio engineer, he recognised the waterfall because it's a similar sort of thing you see when you're working with audio frequencies. He said, "What's that? I need to know more about that." And he had to play with the SDR on my laptop, and he said, "I need to get one of these." And he was amazed. He thought I was going to say it was like £200-300. Things like the slightly better one's about 25 quid, but the cheap one's about a tenner. It's like, oh my god! And the software's free, of course. So he's ordered that. Very excited. Also, even more excited when he found out that this thing does, like, I don't know, 100 kilohertz to 1.7 gigahertz or something like that. It's like, yeah, have a play with that. But yes, that was quite good teaching one of my colleagues about how to do that. Of course, I've been up on the talk group, not as much as I normally would have been because I'm taking a different route to work at the moment. So I can't always get up on the talk group as much as I'd like to, but had a couple of chats with Martin and a couple of other people on there recently. But also been doing some research. We had we basically, obviously, we got a repeater in London, and you need to be able to shut it down. And the way that we shut it down at the moment is a bit clunky if you need to get to it. And we needed a solution. And I was recommended a product, and this is a product I think I'm going to give them. I think it's fair to give them a little quick plug because I did bombard them with loads and loads and loads of questions. This is a product called PowerTXT from a company called TechView Solutions. And oh my god, this thing is absolutely amazing. It plugs in like any other kind of smart plug. It's got an antenna on the side and a temperature sensor, and then you just plug your device into the front of it. And with a SIM card that literally costs £2 a month, you can send it a text and it will just kill the power. I mean, it's like mind blown. I've seen 2G versions of these. This company, techview-solutions.com, make 4G versions. So that has pretty much solved our problem overnight. If you're looking for a solution to that, that might be something worth checking out at least. As I say, not sponsored by them, but I have bombarded them with so many questions. And considering I only wanted to buy one, I didn't want to go in and buy 100 or anything. They were very patient with me, so thank you to Emma at TechView. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've been up to.
Right, so that's good news anyway, and I'll look forward to you showing me your remote shutdown device next time I see you.
Yeah, I can send a text message to my lamp and it will turn on at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I got similar things in the house, but I know this has to be on a cellular network because we have to connect to it, and we don't have internet connection at that site. So there you go. Chris, what have you been up to since last time we spoke?
Well, I can't let this pass. Martin mentioned there, he was giving a quick plug for TechView. I thought, oh dear, quick plug. Giving it a plug, sorry.
I didn't even think of that.
Anyway, sorry. And it's TechView with I've just been Googling, it's TechView with a K, T-E-K view, I've finally found. So yeah, it looks like a cool bit of kit, actually, Martin. Hopefully that'll be useful once we get that back up on the, up at the repeater site, save having to go and visit the site, which I know can be painful sometimes. Anyway, what have I been up to? Yeah, I haven't been up to an awful lot, I'm afraid. A couple of minor things. So I was travelling up north. It was my birthday at the weekend, so I was travelling a few hundred miles at the weekend. So I decided to put my FT817 in the car. So I was doing a little tuning around while I was driving. Nothing very exciting, I'm afraid. And I suppose other vaguely relevant things. I bought a device called it's essentially a portable power station. So it's you may have seen these things online. There's a few different brands. The one I bought is from a company called Jackery, but there are lots of other ones as well that are out there. Essentially it's a LiFePO 4 battery in a box with an inverter and a charger, all built into one. There's an app you can remotely control it, turn it on and off. It's got a built-in light. My one's got 2 sockets on the front for mains power. It'll provide up to 1.5 kilowatts of juice, which is quite useful for various different applications. It's also got some DC outputs as well, so it's got a 12-volt cigarette lighter socket, and I think will provide 10 amps. And it's also got 2 or 3 USB sockets as well. So primarily bought that for the camper van, so I can use it off grid. But also I thought it could be quite useful for kind of field-based radio use. It's not really going to be very portable. This thing weighs about, I think, sort of 10 or 12 kilograms. So it's certainly not going to use to something like SOTA. That'd be far too heavy. But certainly kind of a field day type scenario. It's like having a generator without putting in, having the fumes essentially. So the one I've got will do 1,000 watt hours or 1 kilowatt hour. So it's got plenty of capacity, depending on, I guess, what you plug into it. But it could be useful for that sort of thing. You can get bigger ones, you can get smaller ones, but that was the one that I measured it that sort of fits in a nice space in the camper van that could be useful if I'm out somewhere and I'm not plugged into the mains. It'll give us a bit of power. And I haven't bought one. I may get one at some point. You can also buy a solar panel for it as well to charge it from the sun. Didn't think there's a lot of point this time of year here in the UK because we don't get an awful lot of sun. Maybe in the summer might be useful to charge it up. We'll see. But yeah, I thought it might be a useful bit of kit. So, but radio-wise, Martin, I'm afraid very little from me on this one.
Yeah, but very interesting on the power situation and where you're solving that. That's an interesting little box. Well, what have I been up to? Well, this is where I've probably done the least of most. Mrs. B and myself have had COVID for the last 10 days. And for anybody who's had COVID, you feel like rubbish and you just totally are disinterested in everything. You're just totally lethargic. So I apologise that I haven't done very much. Every time I picked a book up to try and read it, I just lost interest pretty much immediately. But on the back end of that, as I'm starting to come out of it, I looked at my shack and I thought, do you know what? It's about time it had a strip out and a rewire and tidy up. And I don't have a big shack. I have pretty much a cupboard the size of a wardrobe. And the idea is that you're supposed to be able to shut it all up if you've got visitors or whatever and you want to allow them to use that as a bedroom. You can just shut the doors on it and it's all out the way. But unfortunately, because it's quite small and you wire lots of bits and pieces into it, it does after a while get a bit of a mess. And I usually have to do this a couple of times a year, just take it all out and rewire it back how it should be done. So that's now done. Done a very, very little operating, in fairness, even for me. Did speak to Martin a couple of times on the talk group. I have been on the talk group, not been in the car much, so I haven't done very much mobile. It's only the last day or so that I've started doing a couple of short runs in the car. I am booked to do a talk. This one may be of interest to some of you. Going back in time, when COVID first hit, Denby Dale Club used to do the Denby Dale chat, and they used to do a lot of chatting online and online meetings. And I know a lot of people from around the world got involved with Denby Dale and joined their meetings. And Nick, great guy that he is, run that for a couple of years. Going forward, the Denby Dale Club and Nick have had a little bit of a parting of the ways. They're not falling out. It's just Denby Dale don't want to do the international meetings with anybody who wants to turn up. I'm booked to do a presentation for them next Wednesday on the 20th at about 8 o'clock. Look them up on the internet, which is pennineham.org.uk. And they got a Facebook group and one thing and another. You can join them. I'm sure they'd be happy to have you on. Last week, our Frank did a presentation for them. Very good presentation on transceiver performance, and that was well received. And last but not least, if you do work me or Martin even in London on UHF, and our talk our hotspots probably connected to UHF, if we suddenly develop packet loss and then come back, I don't believe it is a problem with our talk group and the hardware and one thing or another. I spent a lot of time looking at that. There's been quite a lot of interference, and it's suddenly grown quite bad in London, but interference on 70 centimetres. And it's not just on one frequency. They tend to wander all over the place. And I think it's things like car alarms, weather stations, all those sort of things seem to have gone absolutely mad recently. So if we get a bit of packet loss from you, I apologise, but everybody else seems to be okay. So that's where we are. Okay, well, that's what I've been up to. Not very exciting, I know, but anyway, at least I've been on the radio a little bit. So all that's left for me to do now is to thank the guys for turning up and move on to the next part of the podcast. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I'd like to thank Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
It's been fun. See you next time.
Yeah, will do. And last but not least, Mr. Leslie Butteresfields, G0CIB.
Thanks for having me on, Martin. It's a blast as always.
Yeah, great fun. And a shame that Frank and Bill couldn't join us tonight, but they will be back for another podcast. Don't worry about them. They will be back.
And get well soon, Frank. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and get well soon, Frank. He's just feeling a bit under the weather at the moment. Right. I'll say 73, guys, and we'll move on to the next part of the podcast. 73.
73.
Cheerio.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin, M6BOY. The ARRL have published details of this year's ARRL Field Day, and great news. It attracted nearly 1.3 million contacts in the reporting period of the 24 hours of the event, and that's slightly up on the 1.25 million contacts of last year, and that's likely due to the continued rise in the Solar Cycle 25, which is leading up to the event. But they also think as well more people also participated in this year's event. Entries were received from all 85 American and Canadian sections, as well as 27 different countries from outside the US and Canada. So it's a great opportunity there for everyone to work away as they did. Class A, B and C scores are included in the 2024 QST results article, and scores for classes D, E and F stations and club aggregate scores are listed on the web version as well as the digital version of QST as well. So we've got a link to obviously the article for this for you, so you can go dig out such results as you may see fit. But fantastic news there that I say this year's ARRL Field Day was a resounding success. An opportunity for you constructors out there to be celebrated. The RSGB has launched its construction competition for this year. Entries to the annual competition will again be judged online to allow RSGB members from the UK and across the world to participate and demonstrate their creativity. In line with the RSGB's strategic priority of growth, there will be a new outreach category this year in which members are encouraged to submit a project that can be reproduced in a school or public environment. So there's 5 categories for you to potentially enter: beginners, construction excellence, innovation, software and antennas. Great news is cash prizes are available and awarded to all winners of each section, as well as a bonus to the overall winner. So great opportunity to get involved here. As always, we'll put a link to how you can enter on icqpodcast.com, and good luck to all you construction builders, software coders and antenna riggers out there. Friend of the show, Data Victor Uniform 2 Delta Sierra India has let us know about a special event station he's running. He's running AU2, that's Alpha Uniform 2 Juliet Charlie Bravo, and it's a special event call sign that's going to be available from the 15th of November through to the 16th of November from India, and it's to recognise the Indian scientists Akra Jagadish Chandra Bose. And I say it's a recognition to his work as the father of wireless communication. Now, I say there's lots of frequencies that this special event station will be on for you, and I say the modes, etc., and I say how to get QSL cards, etc., will be all available for you on icqpodcast.com. So check that out, and we thank Data for sending across this very important special event station. So thanks a lot for letting us know. Right, we're going to head across to our features episode, which is Multimeters Updated. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hi guys, for this episode, I thought I'd revisit something I did a fair while ago on the podcast. And when I say a fair while ago, 15 years ago, April 2009, we had a feature called Multimeters. And I've been told by a few of the listeners, it's about time some of these were updated. Now, the thing that got me when I started and thought back about it is, 15 years ago, unfortunately, some people who were listening 15 years ago aren't with us anymore. And that's a real shame. On the other hand, there could have been somebody who was born 15 years ago and is now coming into the hobby and will find this of use. For others, okay, it's just a revision. And you may have heard me mention some of these things in the past, but I thought it was worth just doing a revamp on multimeters. Now, in fairness, electronic devices have been getting cheaper and cheaper as the years have gone on, and especially with devices coming out of China. And I must admit, I look at some of these devices and I think, I wouldn't mind on those, I quite fancy that, and then I think, would I actually use it? But it's a real simple price. Now, it's exactly the same with multimeters. Multimeters have come down in price. So, don't be afraid to buy what you want, but understand why you want it, or is it right for the job that you want to do? Let's have a look at what's happened and how things have moved on. So, first question I'm going to ask you is, how accurate do you need the meter? Well, it depends whether it's analog or digital. If it's digital, how many digits on the display do you want? If you want it to go to 6 or 7 or 8 places after the decimal point, I would suggest the people that want that, and if you've got the money to buy one, good on you, But the people that really want that are the people that are going to be doing, they're the ones that are going to be doing laboratory work, not a fixer. So if you're a fixer like me, and I was never a designer or worked in the laboratory, I'm a fixer. I want to know if it's there or not. If it's anywhere, if I'm measuring for 5 volts, if it's anywhere between 4.9 and 5.1, as far as I'm concerned, it's there. Now, you could be upset with me on that one, but in fairness, it depends what you're trying to do, how accurate the device has to be, whether you're doing lab work or repair work. Now, measuring resistance, once again, when you're measuring resistance, how accurate does it have to be? Bearing in mind your resistors have got a tolerance as well. So if you've got a 10% resistor, a 1K 10% resistor, that could be anywhere between 100 ohms up or 100 ohms down on the 1K. It could be between 900 and 1.1K. So, why beat yourself up too much? I know you're going to get annoyed with me and say, well, he's just oversimplifying things. Well, probably I am. Now, analog or digital? Now, I always say this, I would say both, but no, if I had to choose, and if you are very new to the hobby and you've never used a multimeter before, or you're very inexperienced in doing electrical measurements, go for a digital multimeter because they are more forgiving. If you get the probes around the wrong way or if you overvoltage them, they normally tell you. But apart from that, okay, what else can these meters do? Well, the digital meters, a lot of them these days now are coming out and they're auto-ranging. Now, they were auto-ranging back in 2009, some of them, but auto-range now on multimeters has got a lot cheaper because electronics has. So all you do is select your voltage, put your probes on, and the meter will work out what the measurement will be, and will put the decimal point in the right place. That makes life a little easier. I'm never sure whether I trust it, but ones I have work very, very well at doing that. Once again, on a digital meter, why would you want a transistor tester? Well, I kind of half worked this one out. If they're just there as a selling point to get you to it. If you want to work out the gain of a transistor, if you're designing things and you want to know the gain of a particular transistor, then maybe that's quite useful to have on your multimeter. But on a cheaper multimeter, how accurate is it? I don't know. Just a thought. The same with capacitance meters. You're not potentially doing a lot with capacitance, and multimeters should be volts, ohms and amps. But if you want to test a capacitor on it, a lot of them have now got capacitance measurements on them on the digital multimeter. Another thing is a diode tester. Okay, so what they try and do with a diode tester is they put a voltage across the diode and see if it conducts. And that's what it's supposed to do. So one way it'll conduct, the other way it won't. However, as I've mentioned many times before, depends on the voltage you're putting across the diode. So for argument's sake, if you tried to measure an LED and you were only putting, say, 1 volt or half a volt across the diode, then it wouldn't turn on, and therefore you wouldn't have any. You'd think you had a dead LED, in which case you wouldn't. So, in the old days with analog meters, why would we, not use an analog meter? Well, analog meters have a lower impedance when you're measuring in the circuit. And we'll come on to this again in a minute, but most digital meters, if you connect them into a circuit, have an impedance of about 10 megohms. So very, very little current's going to be drawn out of it. On an old-fashioned analog meter, you have a thing called ohms per volt. So, nice AVO 8, which is like one of your big Simpsons in the States, boys, that's 20,000 ohms per volt. So on the 10 volt range, it's 10 times 20,000, it's 200k. So effectively, if I'm measuring on the 10 volt range, I'm putting a 200 kilo ohm resistor in the circuit. So you have to be aware that analog meters will load the circuit. However, to get around it in the early days, they also, when they were testing in laboratories, they had a thing called a valve or tube multimeter. And these were very, very high impedance. And some of them are probably higher impedance than some of the digital meters we have today. And they worked very, very well. Once again, majority of the time, these would have been used in laboratories or test areas, not so much for field service or servicing, although very, very useful. But today, they've become a bit long in the tooth. You can actually find FET voltmeters, analog voltmeters with very, very high input impedances, and I have one of those as well. And it works very, very well. Once again, you'll get a far more accurate reading of what the voltage is at that point in time, but is it required for what you're doing? If you're fixing a piece of equipment, you just want to know whether the voltage is there or not often. So that's another thing. Ohms per volt, usually I wouldn't go anything less than 20,000 ohms per volt on a DC meter, DC 20,000 ohms per volt, although I do own a 10,000 ohm per volt meter as well. And the AC range is usually a lower ohms per volt than the DC range. So just when you're looking at it, be aware. Now on an analog meter and digital meter, you have a certain frequency response. Yeah, it's supposed to measure either DC or mains voltage. Now, ideally in the UK 50 Hertz, the States 60 Hertz. Double that in case we've got full wave rectification and we're seeing if we've got a full wave rectification happening. But much above 500 Hertz, your multimeter is probably going to start looking very, very poor. Another thing to work out on with an analog meter is when you're measuring resistance on an analog meter, you're actually passing a current through the device on test. And it's worth doing a quick current measurement to measure to see what current you're passing through. Because nowadays, if you had something that used very, very low current, say 100 milliamps or 150 milliamps, at least one of my meters puts 175 milliamps through on testing resistance. Now with 175 milliamps flowing, that would blow a 150 milliamp fuse. So all I'd have was a load of dub fuses and not work out why. So it's worth measuring and understanding what's going on. The other thing to improve accuracy on the analog meters is a number of them have what is known as a mirror on the scale. Now, the idea of that is to improve your accuracy. So if you look at your multimeter scale and where the needle is, if you look down and can see a reflection of the needle in the mirror, then you're not looking straight down on top of the meter. You have to position your head so when you look straight down, you can't see a reflection back. And that will mean that that's exactly where you are on the scale. So little things are there to improve your bits and pieces. Now, I a few months back, Frank, bless him, gave me a nice calibrator to calibrate my meters. Now, if you've got more than one meter, chances are they won't read the same for a number of reasons, for a whole host of reasons. It might be one analog and one digital. They might be higher. It might be the test leads, all sorts of things. But calibration, if you've got one, they're very interested to use. But no, I wouldn't worry too much. And the other thing is, like, when you measure it, you say, I can measure a 9-volt battery. So you go and get a PP3 battery and you stick your multimeter on it. And chances are it will read a lot higher than you expect. And that's because you're not drawing any current. So don't expect it to work perfectly. One other thing, probes and connectors. Once again, and I've laboured this a few times on the podcast, be very careful of some of these probes that come with these meters. Some of the cheaper meters, I'm sure the meter can handle 10 amp current range. And then I look at the wires and think, there's no way that's going to handle 10 amps for very long. And the other thing also is I look at the insulation on some of these leads and think, yeah, I'm going to hold on to that at 1,000 volts, am I? Not. So they might measure 1,000 volts on the meter, but yeah, I'd be very suspect on the breakdown voltage of some of these meter leads. Very suspect. Now, I had a friend the other week ring me up and said, I'm measuring a fuse. The fuse is okay because it's giving me some numbers on this display, not the OL. And I went, what's the numbers? And they told me, I can't remember exactly now. I said, the fuse is blown. No, it can't be, I said, because it's not blown because I've got numbers. I said, you are actually measuring yourself, the resistance yourself. You're probably on a high range and you're measuring the resistance yourself. A fuse should measure short circuit. And they're either short circuit or open circuit, apart from the couple I've had in the last couple of years, which have been a bit strange, but 99.999% will be either short circuit or open circuit. And once again, it really depends on what you're trying to do with this stuff, how you want to measure, what you want to measure. If your budget covers you for a really expensive meter and that's what you want, go for it. I've no objection. However, if all you're going to do is check fuses on your car and make sure your 12-volt battery is reasonably charged and that sort of thing, poking around, then don't spend an absolute fortune, I would suggest. I hope this was of interest.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed this episode's feature, revisiting multimeters. And as I say, I'm sure that update, as always, will include a few wonderful little gems that, our listeners will appreciate. So thanks, Dad, for doing that there for us. Right, feedback this episode, and Scott McDonald, our friend in Chicago, sent in a nice bit of feedback for us, and this is following up from a conversation was had in relation to Boeing. The new Boeing CEO, he says, as of a few months ago, is Kelly Ortberg. Kelly spent a lot of time at Rothwelll Collins, and in his tenure, he believes as the CEO, maybe a radio-ish guy can save Boeing. He is a real technology at roots, and he refers to a Financial Times article, Can Kelly Ortberg Turn Boeing Around? So we'll put a link to that on the show notes, but I've got a feeling that might be behind a firewall, but we'll see what we can do for you. But Scott tells us that in the article, you'll see that he captured avionics for the 787 back for Collins after losing the 777 avionics by implementing, if he's reading between the lines correctly, SDR architecture in commercial plane avionics. And he then goes to tell and also why AI may replace many of us. I think this is in relation to the radio station that tried to replace its presenters with AI jocks. He said, there's no doubt that I could never replace or replicate dear Edmund's contribution to the podcast. And there you go, Scott, you're showing your favouritism there to our dear Edmund. So thanks, Scott, there for your very kind words in from Chicago. And Dad, I can't remember Scott's call sign off the top of my head, and I really hope you're going to bail me out. I think it's like KJ5 something, isn't it, off the top of my head, but I can't remember what it is.
You couldn't have got it further wrong, mate. Scott's call sign KA9P for Papa.
I knew it was 4. Yeah, that rings the absolute bell there. You say that.
KA9P. So, Scott, hopefully I'll get to chat to you in the next few days. I often do. Thanks very much for the feedback. And let's say it's always appreciated. And I hope you and your good lady, Sarah, are keeping well.
So thanks there. So if you want to express your feedback on anything from the ICQ podcast, there's loads of ways of doing it. Either drop us a mail from the contact us page, social medias, or you can comment on the individual news stories as well. So we'd appreciate you taking the time to have a think about that. Now, the other important thing you can do is show your value for your ICQ podcast and do what Steve Annis, KJ5T and Brad Councilman, Whiskey 1 Bravo Charlie did. And as they show their value by going to icqpodcast.com/donate. And they were monthly subscription donors have, as they paid our way and kept your show on the air. So we really do appreciate, their kind support. We'd also like to thank Chris Howard, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin Rothwell, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, and Leslie Butteresfields, Golf 0 Charlie Indy Bravo for their time and their thoughts and opinions in the News Roundtable, and join your dad there for that section of the show. So we really do appreciate them from there. Right, well, that's just about wrapped up episode 443 of your ICQ Amateur Radio podcast. Last very important thing to do is, of course, to make Mrs. B a cup of tea. And as I say, maybe give her a little early seasonal treat, as the shops are full of Christmas fare already. And you might be able to find something nice for her.
Yeah, well, Mrs. B and I, as I mentioned earlier, are recovering from COVID, but a nice cup of tea and a little treat will go down well. So that's what I'm off to do now, Colin. And your mum's pretty much over it. I think another day or so and she'll be fully over it. So that's a good one.
Yeah, it takes a lot to get that woman down, so as I should be back up on show on full cylinders very, very soon. Well, everybody, we're going to bid you 73s, and we're going to catch up with you in a fortnight time, and of course, as always, we hope you enjoy our wonderful hobby. 73s, all.
Yeah, 73.